Allison that I would not delay any rehearsal time, and no one would miss rehearsal time except for me. So here we are, and I'm limiting myself. We have 3 songs, 3 poems in this presentation. So it's going to be a show and tell, folks. Not a lot. I mean, I've been a teacher. I was a teacher for 43 years. I taught high school mostly in the International Baccalaureate program, theory of knowledge, English literature, poems for detailed study. And students would take a poem. They would have 20 minutes to understand that poem, and then they would do a 10 to 12 minute oral commentary on that poem.
Ooh.
So I won't test
So we're
you at
lucky.
the end of this. And they got college credit if they did well. And I was charged as being their English teacher for making sure that they did well. So, don't ask me why, but I'm nervous. This is what I had shown Allison.
God damn it, sorry.
Ah, there's always one. Leave it to the
Don't do that during
tenors.
the concert.
This is my messy understanding of the road not taken. Here's another one of choose something like a star. It's turned out to be my favorite, and it's the one that I knew nothing about whatsoever. And Stopping by Woods, of course. So, poems for detailed study. Those are the 3. The Road Not Taken, Choose Something Like a Star, and Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. And as I said, we're going to move rather quickly through these, but not too quickly that you won't understand. We're going to look at the mood, the feeling in the poetry, the poems, the movement or lack of, and in the end, the meaning of the poems. But that's going to be up to you to decide on your understanding, your meaning. And here's an approach that I use. It's called TPCAST. T-P-C-A-S-T-T. And it's easy for the kids, and they have worksheets that they can fill it in as they go along. And it makes it understandable and logical to put all their thoughts on a piece of paper before they start to really put down their understanding. So I asked them to ponder the title before reading the poem. What does it suggest? And we'll do that for all 3. You paraphrase the poem. You put it into your own words. You just say what's happening, what's being described, who the speaker is, perhaps who he's speaking to, the audience. Then you start to get into it. The connotation. You go beyond the literal. You consider metaphor and simile and symbol, figurative devices that poets use, the language, the diction. And through that, you can understand a bit of the poet's attitude towards his subject, but also the speaker's attitude towards the subject. And mostly tone, diction, imagery, or images, and mood. Poetry always has a shift or 2 or 3. There's a shift in focus, a shift in setting, in speaker, and attitudes. It's not enough to identify them. I'll do that for you. But you have to consider the effect of that shift. What does the poet accomplish? You look at the title again. In light of everything that you've done in the past 15 minutes, let's say. And then you make connections, you draw conclusions as to significance, and you try to determine the underlying message, the theme, the big picture, as I would tell the kids. Robert Frost is fabulous at connecting his title to his theme. And it always connects to the final lines of the poem. And if you can make that connection after you've gone through all of this, from here to here, and then you go, aha. That's what I did for Choose Something Like a Star, but he made that a little bit easier for me. So I'm going to start with The Road Not Taken. Here it is. Title, The Road Not Taken. A choice of a decision. The paraphrase, you know it as well as I do. There's a guy in the woods and there are two roads. It comes to a fork in the road and he tries to decide which one to take. And then he takes one and not the other. Now wait a minute, at the very end he says, I'm going to be telling this with a sigh. Who is he going to be telling it to and why a sigh? Okay, that's that. So we know the speaker. We know his experience, who he's speaking to, possibly. Do we know that? His purpose. In the beginning, I think he's speaking to himself or thinking to himself. The connotation, you get into the meat of the poem. So imagery. Imagery are words that appeal to the senses. Sight, smell, sounds, feeling, touch. Words that connect to nature, if you're Robert Frost. Words that suggest movement, diverged, it bent in the undergrowth. Conjunctions, words that bring ideas together, and, or make a contrast, though, as for that. Punctuation, for emphasis, the kids used to say. I'm like, what's he emphasizing? How? What? Speeds it up, slows it down. Diction, word choice. Why choose this word? Why use this word over another? So there are key words in The Road Not Taken, and I love color coding. I showed it to you. Oops, there go my notes. Where did they disappear? Static words that don't show movement. Words that show doubt or uncertainty. Conjunctions that I mentioned. Related to nature. There are contrasts here and similarities in nature and in his thoughts. Now, I don't think I have to explain this poem to you. I just want to point out aspects of it. How many of you know that all of these poems are written out in the front of Frostiana? I didn't. I hadn't looked at them, but I do have my own copy of Frost, so I went to all of them. So we look at contrasts, and he's very good at that. The meter, I say that this poem suggests iambic tetrameter. Do you know what an iamb is? That's it. Da, da, da. Now, when we speak iambic pentameter. That's what Shakespeare did. All of his soliloquies are iambic pentameter. I was assistant principal for a while, so I would give examples that the kids would understand. I want to leave this boring class right now. They caught him smoking, now he'll be expelled. I could do whole lessons in iambic pentameter. But this is tetrameter, and it's not really. But it sounds like it is because it always begins with that iamb. Two roads, and be, and looked to where. And yet, he changes that around in a couple of lines. Hint, hint. Where he breaks it. Oh, somewhere. We don't go somewhere. That's a key word. You've got to figure out what that means. Attitude is what the A of tipcast. And you figure that out through looking at the connotation and the shifts. And most of these poems, I put the shifts in for you. and you can figure out what's happening or how, why. So here's my color-coded poem. And I went through with highlighters and a glass of wine. And I said, let's find nature, and I used green. Oh, I'll put these up to remind you. And then I said, let's look for movement. Two roads diverge, orange. Travel both, passing. Not a lot of movement. Whoops. I looked for static words that no movement. Long I stood, looked. It wanted where, no step had trodden. And I looked for words that showed doubt or uncertainty. Sorry, perhaps, though, doubted, with a sigh. And the conjunctions, the ands, and the becauses, and the yet. And I considered the title again. The road not taken. And I think right here, I have to note the yellow highlights. So, all of the yellow is about the road. So he took the other, really about the same, equally lay. I kept the first for another day. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. But wait a minute, you said they're about the same. They're equal. So there's no difference. But in the end, he says it's made all the difference. So is he being dramatic? And who's his audience? Well, because I don't think he's by himself anymore down here, but that's the big shift. Paraphrase. He comes to a spot, describes it, tries to decide which road to take, and he hopes to see where it leads, maybe what's in store in his life. The speaker's thought process in making the decisions, to me, seems tentative, wishy-washy. I don't know. When he finally makes that decision, he never indicates why he keeps the first for another day. Is it a spur-of-the-moment decision or a considered one? This stanza 2, suggests that he's thinking about it, it's considered. But this little exclamation point and the O where he breaks the meter, that sounds spur of the moment. I'm not going to stand here. Never mind. It's not that probably. But there's a shift here. And that shift, I don't know what I'm looking for it. The punctuation seems too strong for the decision. But what does Thompson do there? Sing that line in your head. I kept first. Right? There's a bigger shift. It's a change. He's thinking of the future now, not just the moment in the woods. Until now, it's been a private, solitary experience. But now, he's explaining it to others, but we don't know who those others are. And he has this wonderful line, somewhere ages and ages hence. Does anyone love Walt Whitman like I love Walt Whitman? I'm not going to explain this line to you, but crossing Brooklyn Ferry is just amazing, and it's ages and ages hence. One of these started over Manhattan, Paul. So, the sigh. Dissatisfaction with his choice? A memory? Is through his poetry, is he going to tell the world, an audience, us who sing it perhaps? Hesitation, because with the pause of this down here, then the repetition of I, is that for emphasis or for, let me convince myself that I it was the one less traveled by perhaps. So he seems to want to justify his decision, or he's reminiscing about a missed opportunity, or both, or something else. And all the difference to what? His life, his understanding, is he satisfied or regretful? And I'm over my 10 minutes. So, food for thought. I used to bake cookies for after-school sessions and say, food for thought. Eat the cookie and now get to work. Choose something like a star. Oh my God, do I love this poem. So here's the title. I had no idea. Choose something like a star. All right, a star's in the sky, sky. Paraphrase, I color-coded it. So very quickly, the speaker addresses the star, and he speaks in the plural, we. I don't get that. We grant your loftiness the right. And it's the right to remain obscure, not to show yourself, but not totally, because, anyway. Top down. What gives him the right to grant anything? It's usually the rule or the other way. I had lots of questions with this poem. So, yeah, you deserve some obscurity or mystery, but you can't keep everything from us. He tries to make sense. My question is still, is not allowed by whom? And then, you can sing this part too, because it just builds and builds and builds. He pushes the star for some lesson, something really important, or simple but important, something that we can, when alone, repeat. But the star just says, I burn, and so he's demanding here, and I'll go into it when I get to the other color-coded page. But there's a real shift in tone and attitude right here. It gives us strangely little aid, but does tell something in the end. And then, of course, the beautiful allusion to Keats' bright star. And we learn what the speaker's understanding of the star's demeanor is and the message, albeit it's unspoken, but we know that he understands. And my guess is that perhaps we must stand upright, or we must be upright, or stand tall, or above the fray. Be something like a star to give us steadfastness and calmness in the midst of chaos. It seemed relevant when I was doing this. Here are the shifts, these little lines between 5 and 6, 8 and 9, 15, 16, and down at the end. Here we go with the meaty part. It's an apostrophe. He's speaking to the star. Oh, star. And what does Thompson do? The sopranos just do that every single line. Oh, star, the fairest one in sight. Oh, star, we grant your loftiness. Oh, star. It's amazing. It's also an ode. It's an ode to the star. It's a poem that praises the star and lauds the star. But I still question that plural we. And he doesn't just praise the star. He admonishes it, he demands things of it, he praises it, and he exhorts it to do things. When I read Your Loftiness the Right, when I sang it without having read the poem, it was words. I didn't have the subtext at all. And when I looked at it, it was like, Your Highness, Your Loftiness. And I went, ah. Consider the pronouns in this poem. I have put them in italics, and it's we, your, us, we, I, it, us. So I would go back to these pronouns if I were doing a commentary on this poem, because I think they're important. I love this one line, since dark is what brings out your light. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't seem to make sense, and yet it makes sense. And he changes the meter, that shift, since dark is what brings out your light, the spondee there, that boom, boom, boom. And there are degrees of intensity in this poem. In lines 3 and 4, the degree of intensity is in the darkness. In 6 through 8, it's the inscrutability of the star. In 12 through 14, it's the explanations, the degree of explanation that he can get. He uses the imperative in this whole section. Say something. Say, talk Fahrenheit, use language, tell us. Oh, that's the line that I already told you. I love it, and I'd probably say it 4 times in this presentation. Thompson's music for this passage. I think when we go to rehearsal, you might think of this when we sing it tonight. There are degrees of understanding in the poem, and there are degrees of steadfastness. And we'll come to that, but my eye is on the clock. So there's a big shift here. And it's an abrupt change in tone and attitude. It's much more introspective. He's given up on demanding. And I think he's accepting that, all right, it's a little bit, but it does tell something. And the shift is in these 2 lines that I just paraphrased. And it's the end of the apostrophe. He's no longer talking to the star. He's talking about it. It, as in it. And the allusion to Keats' ode, Bright Star, is eremite. Little Greek lesson here. I spent 40 years in Greece. Eremos is desert, but it's also desolate. And there's another Greek word. This is the masculine word, eremos, but eremia, what looks like an H here, or an N, is actually an E. And it's the feminine ending. So it's, in English it would be eremi, but it means calm. And so those 3 words, desert, desolate, and calm, that come together for me here. And when these 2 words, where the shift is, it asks a little of us. What an understatement. It's asking for more than a little. It's asking for a higher degree of steadfastness, so that when the mob is swayed to carry praise or blame, we may choose something like a star. What's the title of this poem?
Choose something.
Where are we at the end of the poem? Another shift. He shifts to mankind before he returns to the star at the very end. And maybe it's what we need in these fraught times, to emulate the star, to let the dark bring out our light, to stand tall or calm or steadfast. And then I thought, well, what did I learn about the star? So I wrote down a bunch of adjectives. The fairest one, held in high esteem, proud, inscrutable, reserved, taciturn, knowledgeable, wise, respected. It's not just a star, but I haven't yet figured out what it represents. Maybe someone in here will think about it and then let me know your thoughts. But that's that one. We're on time, folks. Stopping by woods. How many of you? This is easy, right? Not so much. Oh, there's always someone in the front row. So we consider the title, and the title, speaker, and setting seem straightforward. Stopping by the woods on a snowy evening, we know what's happening. Paraphrase seems pretty easy. Guy with his horse, I think the horse is pulling a sleigh. I don't think he's on horseback. Going through the woods, and he pauses. and then he has to leave. The meter is regular. These woods, these are all the way through. Yeah, all the way through in this one. But Frost avoids it being sing-songy, even with that regular iambic tetrameter, and more on this later. It's a poem of contrasts. So, in the first stanza, within each stanza there's a contrast. There's the contrast of the woods and the village in the first. The farmhouse and the woods and the frozen lake. The harness bells, the sound of man-made, village, man, farmhouse, man, woods, frozen lakes, nature. There's movement and stasis, and the Greek words are kinesis and stasis. That's because our word came from theirs. Kinesi in Greek is also traffic on the roads. Lots of kinesi, heavy kinesi. Stasi, when you're talking about traffic, are the stops, the bus stops, the trolley stops, the train stops. So it stops within the movement of the traffic. And I thank goodness that I lived in Greece for so many years and learned Greek and appreciate it. So there's movement in the first two lines here. And there's stasi when we get to the imagery of nature. And there's movement when the horse gives his harness bells a shake. And there's stasi when the only other sound's the sweep of easy. Don't you know that I love this line? And down flake. And there's stasi when the woods are lovely, dark, and deep. But then there's movement because I have miles to go. So in the end, I thought, well, the only real movement is the horse. That's there. But the sound devices are amazing. And the assonants, the vowel sounds, and the consonants, those consonant sounds, they're soft consonant sounds, except for 6. More on the next slide. And the imagery of nature that appeals to our senses. So visual, auditory, tactile. It's all here and sometimes all in the same line and all in the same 3 words or 2 words. The effect, I always push for effect for the kids. I think it's that the movement of nature seems still and quiet and silent and dark. And I just love these lines of stasis that are created by the imagery, the sound devices, and that movement. So here we are, color-coded. The yellow are the long vowels, the assonants. O, E, O, E, A. All long vowels at the ends of these lines. And the consonants is the S's and the W's, the and the echo. They echo the softness of the wind and the snowfall. It's a soft sibilant, so there are S's in here, but the and the do that also, and really mute it. And the long vowel sounds lengthen that experience. We run out of breath when we sing those at the end. And the movement becomes stilled, even with the iambic tetrameter. And this is how he avoids being sing-songy, I think. So the sound devices, I mentioned assonants, consonants, alliteration, the repetition of first sound, consonant sounds in words. Not very much, but there are only 6 hard consonants, D, D, and B, B. And they're both, I can't remember the word for it, but darkest, downy, dark, and deep. Diction. When you sing that, think of these things. Verb choice. This contrast, I just love. Okay, stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Stopping is a gerund. What I tell the kids, it's either a verb acting as a noun, or it's a noun disguised as a verb. Because it's the stopping by woods on a snowy evening. So the ing, the continuous verb, suggests movement. That's why you do have present continuous or past continuous. They were doing it, they were doing it. But the verb itself is stop. So you don't. And to watch, and right here, follow that arrow, is a passive verb. And fill up with is active, but it's the human who's passively watching, and it's the nature which is filling up the woods with the snow. So Thompson, moving straight to the final stanza here. And what Thompson does with those long vowel sounds in this final stanza especially, yeah. He really slows the experience. And there's a stillness before the speaker leaves the woods and has many miles, slow miles to go, I'm betting. And of course, the promise of he has promises to keep, but he has the promise of the stillness of sleep. And of course, sleep is that stillness that's not quite as still as death. It's so look at that poem.
Not because of you, anyway.
Huh?
Not because of you.
Comments or questions?
Just a wow.
This is what I did for 43 years.
I'm not, I just hear the words and with the music, and I have impressions.
Yeah.
I have feelings and emotions, but I never try to figure, or I haven't
Yeah.
tried to really figure them out. But what you're saying resonated.
I had a music teacher once that told me you can't ever sing a song without knowing the subtext. Because, you know, we've had this conversation, I think. And so I was trying to get to the subtext. Yes?
Is there any historical, or is there a historical context to choose something like a star?
Well, there's a reference to Keats' Bright Star, that ode, and I have a copy of that. I looked at it. I used to teach Keats also for detailed study.
No, I was talking more about the when the mob was
About
slain.
choose something like a star? I
Yeah,
don't know.
I was talking-
Historically, politically,
Yes, politically.
it came to my mind, I wonder when that was
So
written.
when the mob is swayed, carry preservation far.
Oh, when did he write the poem? What does it say in the book? Does it give it
That's what I was
years?
trying to figure out.
You know, I tried not to have kids go and look up things about the poems. I say rely on the poet's words and techniques.
Yeah, it doesn't
I'll
say.
have to look that up though,
Yeah.
for sure.
The Frostiana composition was first performed in Amherst.
Yeah.
Yes.
What was it, bicentennial? Does anybody
Yes.
remember
Yeah.
what year that was?
1959.
59.
Says
Because
so.
it made,
Says so in here.
I always think of Kennedy with that song. It's a little before his
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
certainly the
I had
poem
never
was-
read this poem before.
But
Choose
that's
Something
how
Like
kind
a
of how
Star.
I.
It's not one that I was familiar with.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd like to know.
Oh, there's a
I'll find
line there, asks of us a certain, something asks of us a certain height. Every single time I sing that line, my shoulders go up. I just kind of go up a little bit, and Carl, you've noticed that. I get into this song now.
Yeah.
But anyway, I call it a song. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Choose Something Like a Star is copyright 1947.
Okay.
I was gonna